A little girl trembled on a frozen park bench, clutching a crumpled paper bag as her only treasure. A lonely millionaire knelt beside her, whispering a single question that would shatter every wall he had built in 20 years. Her answer that night would force him to face the monster he had become. Manhattan glittered like a jeweled crown on Christmas Eve. Snow spiraled beneath the street lamps, each flake catching the amber glow of holiday bulbs strung across Fifth Avenue. Carols drifted faintly from a distant church, mingling with the metallic hum of traffic. The city wore its finest mask, pretending the world was warm and kind and full of magic. But Marcus Thorne knew better. Inside the back seat of his black BMW, he sat in silence, watching frost form patterns on the glass. He was 39 years old, sculpted by precision and wealth, yet hollowed by a grief that no empire could shield. His daughter Lily had died the winter before, and tonight, while others toasted with champagne, he circled the edges of Central Park, unable to face his gilded penthouse. The city blurred past his window. Families pressed their noses against bakery displays. Couples held hands beneath twinkling lights. Children squealed as they built crooked snowmen in pocket parks. Marcus looked away from all of it. Joy felt obscene when his own world had gone dark. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Torres. The housekeeper had texted him twice already. "Dinner is ready, senor." The words glowed on his screen like an accusation. He silenced the phone and dropped it into the cup holder. He had spent 20 years building Thorne Industries from nothing into a titan. 20 years of 16-hour days, brutal negotiations, calculated risks. He had won every battle that mattered in the boardroom. But he had lost the only war that truly counted. 1 year ago, Lily had been dying. 6 years old, golden curls, eyes like summer sky. A rare heart condition the doctors could not fix. She had lain in that sterile hospital room, tubes snaking from her tiny arms, machines beeping their monotonous rhythm, and she had asked him one simple thing. "Daddy, will you stay home with me this Christmas?" "Of course, princess, I promise." But then the call had come. The Tokyo client, the $50 million deal that would cement his empire. Marcus had stood in that hospital room, torn between his daughter's pleading gaze and the ringing phone in his pocket. He had kissed Lily's forehead and made his choice. "I'll be back before you fall asleep, sweetheart." Just a few hours. He had not made it back in time. When his phone had rung at 9 that evening, Marcus had been shaking hands with executives in a Manhattan high-rise. Champagne in hand, victory on his lips. Mrs. Torres had been sobbing on the other end. "Senor, Lily, she is gone." Marcus had driven 100 miles an hour through the city. He had burst into that hospital room to find Lily still and cold, her small hand clutching a half-finished drawing. Two stick figures holding hands. Daddy and me. The crayon had fallen from her fingers mid-stroke. Now, 1 year later, Marcus still could not forgive himself. He worked 18 hours a day to avoid going home. He kept Lily's room exactly as she had left it, door locked, untouched. He told himself he was honoring her memory, but the truth was simpler and more brutal. He was running. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, he had nowhere left to run. Marcus pulled the car to a stop near West 72nd Street. He did not know why. Some instinct, some thread of fate had guided his hands. He killed the engine and sat in the sudden quiet, listening to his own breath fog the windows. That was when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind. A thin cry muffled and broken. The sound of something small and desperate trying not to be heard. Marcus froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. For one wild moment he thought he was imagining it. Grief playing tricks. The ghost of Lily calling to him through the snow. But the sound came again. Sharper this time, real. Marcus shoved open the car door and stepped into the cold. The wind sliced through his tailored suit, but he barely felt it. He followed the sound deeper into the park, past the glow of the street lamps, into the shadows where the city's light could not quite reach. And there, on a bench dusted with snow, sat a little girl. She was perhaps 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and a coat 2 sizes too thin. Her lips were blue, her small body shaking in rhythmic spasms. She clutched a crumpled paper bag to her chest like armor, rocking back and forth, whispering to herself, "I'm not supposed to sleep." Aunt Vanessa said, "Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. This child, this fragile, freezing child, she had Lily's hair, Lily's build, the same heartbreaking innocence in her trembling frame. He moved without thinking. His knees hit the frozen ground beside the bench, snow soaking through his expensive trousers. He shrugged off his cashmere coat and draped it over her shaking shoulders. For one frozen instant, when she looked up at him with those windy, terrified eyes, Marcus saw Lily staring back. Hey there, sweetheart. His voice came out choked, barely more than a rasp. Why are you out here alone? The little girl flinched at his touch, clutching the paper bag tighter. Snow crusted her eyelids. Her teeth chattered like broken glass. Her small fingers were mottled purple and white. I can't go anywhere. It's dangerous. The girl's voice was so quiet, Marcus had to lean closer to hear. I have to wait for Mommy. Marcus forced his voice steady, lowering himself fully to her level, letting the cold bite into his knees. Where's your mom, sweetheart? She's in the hospital. The girl's eyes darted toward the darkness of the park, as if something lurked there. Anna Vanessa said not to go to the hospital, not to the police. She said to wait here. Marcus froze, his heart clenching at the name. An aunt who warned a child away from help, who left a 7-year-old alone on a frozen bench on Christmas Eve. He forced his voice to remain gentle, his hands open and non-threatening. What's your name, honey? She hesitated, then whispered, Sophie, Sophie. He repeated it softly, as if naming her could anchor her to this moment, to survival. That's a beautiful name. I'm Marcus. Sophie studied him with eyes far too old for her face. You look sad, mister. The observation hit Marcus like a fist to the chest. This child, freezing and alone, was worried about him. Do I? Yes, Sophie's voice was matter of fact. You have sad eyes. Mommy says people with sad eyes aren't looking at anything anymore. They're just remembering. Marcus swallowed hard. Your mom sounds very wise. She is. Sophie's lower lip trembled. I miss her. Marcus glanced down at the paper bag still clutched in her small hands. What do you have there, Sophie? She loosened her grip slightly. Inside was a single cinnamon roll, washed and stale, the icing cracked and gray. Her eyes brimmed with tears, shame flooding her cheeks. It's all I have. I was saving it. Marcus did not let her sink into that shame. He opened his hands, palms up, making his voice light despite the stone in his throat. How about a trade? You wear my coat, and I get one bite of that cinnamon roll. Deal? Sophie blinked, confused by the absurdity of a rich man in an expensive suit wanting her crushed pastry. Then slowly she nodded. She let him slip the heavy wool coat over her trembling frame. It swallowed her completely, the hem dragging in the snow. She tore off a tiny corner of the cinnamon roll and placed it in his palm with the solemnity of a sacred offering. Marcus bit into the dry, sugared crust as though it were a feast from the finest restaurant in Manhattan. Best thing I've tasted all year. He meant it. For the first time, Sophie's lips curled into the faintest smile. Really? Really? But then Marcus saw them, the marks on her wrist as the coat sleeve slipped back. Not one bruise, a constellation of them, small, deliberate, in varying shades of purple and yellow and green. The pattern of someone gripping too hard, too often. His blood went cold. Sophie, who gave you those bruises? Sophie yanked her hand back, fear replacing the smile. I fell. You fell a lot? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Aunt Vanessa said if I tell anyone, she'll send me away where Mommy can't find me. Marcus felt rage bloom hot and sharp in his chest, but he forced it down, made his voice gentle. Sophie, listen to me very carefully. I'm going to take you somewhere warm, somewhere safe, and I promise you your aunt will never hurt you again. But Sophie shook her head violently. I have to wait here for Mommy. She'll come. Your Mommy would want you safe, wouldn't she? Marcus kept his voice steady, even as his mind raced. What if you waited somewhere warm? What if we made sure your Mommy knew exactly where you were? Sophie looked torn, her small face crumpling with indecision. Will you stay with me? Every second, I promise. Sophie looked once more into the darkness of the park, as if expecting something terrible to emerge. Then slowly she placed her small hand in his. Okay. Marcus scooped her up, coat and all, and carried her toward his car. She weighed almost nothing, Her body was still shaking, but now she pressed her face against his shoulder, exhausted beyond words. As he settled her into the back seat, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Mrs. Torres. Prep a warm bath, hot cocoa, and the guest room. We're bringing someone home. Senor? A little girl. She's hypothermic. Call Dr. Martinez. Tell him it's urgent. He hung up before Mrs. Torres could respond. Sophie had already fallen asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling in shallow, exhausted breaths. Marcus drove through the glittering city, his hands steady on the wheel, his mind spinning with purpose for the first time in a year. He did not know Sophie's full story yet. He did not know the depth of her suffering or the evil that had driven her onto that frozen bench. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time he would not fail. This time he would not choose the empire over the child. Lily had given him a second chance, and he would not waste it. The elevator doors slid open into Marcus's penthouse with a soft chime. The space looked like it had been decorated for ghosts. Twinkling garlands framed the marble entry. A 12-foot fir tree sparkled with crystal ornaments. Every surface gleamed with wealth and precision. But the air felt too still, like a museum of Christmas rather than a home. Marcus stepped in, carrying Sophie wrapped inside his coat. Her tiny face peeked from the oversized collar, eyes wide as she took in the impossible luxury. Mrs. Torres was already waiting, as if she had anticipated his call. The older woman, stern and efficient in her wool slippers, marched forward muttering in Spanish about a child out in this weather. Hot bath first, senor. Then milk. Then bed. Mrs. Torres took Sophie gently but firmly, tucking her under the warm glow of the hallway chandelier. But as the light caught Sophie's wrist, Mrs. Torres froze. The faint constellation of bruises patterned her skin. Small, deliberate shapes, not the random scatter of childhood clumsiness. Mrs. Torres's lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She looked up at Marcus, her eyes blazing. Senor, this girl has been hurt. You must call the authorities. It is the law. Marcus's chest tightened. He had avoided authorities, avoided responsibility, avoided anything that might pull him back into the machinery of loss. Ever since Lily, the memory of sterile hospital walls and signatures on life support papers still sliced through him at night. But Mrs. Torres cut him off before he could speak, her voice sharp with a pain that came from somewhere deep. Listen to me. Being afraid is not the same as being unkind. You opened the door tonight. Don't close it again. Marcus stood silent in the hallway, staring at the old snow globe on the shelf. Inside, painted glass flakes swirled around a porcelain girl with a red scarf, frozen in joy, untouchable. Lily's snow globe. For a year, he had guarded that silence, unable to face it. Then a small sound pulled him back. Sophie's laugh, light and tentative, drifting from the guest bathroom as Mrs. Torres coaxed her with warm water and silly stories in broken English and Spanish. That laugh cracked something in him. Marcus turned toward the living room, struck a match, and lit the fire in the stone hearth. Flames roared to life, their glow spreading warmth across the room. It was as if the house itself exhaled after years of holding its breath. For the first time since Lily's death, Marcus felt movement. Not healing, not yet, but a stirring, like a frozen river beginning to break under spring sun. By the time Sophie padded out, dressed in oversized pajamas that trailed at her ankles, her damp hair sticking in golden strands to her cheeks, Marcus had set the dining table. Mrs. Torres had prepared a feast. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread still steaming from the oven. Sophie stood in the doorway, staring at the spread as though it were a mirage. This is all for me? You can eat as much as you want, sweetheart. Sophie climbed into a chair that dwarfed her. She picked up a fork with trembling hands and took a small bite of potato. Then another. Then she was eating with the desperate hunger of someone who had gone too long without. But halfway through the meal, she stopped. Can I save some for Mommy? Marcus exchanged a glance with Mrs. Torres. Of course you can, honey. We'll make sure your mom gets plenty to eat, too. Sophie relaxed slightly. Mommy didn't eat for 3 days before the accident. She gave all the food to me. Marcus set down his fork. Sophie, do you know what happened to your mom? I don't know. Sophie's voice was small. I was at school. When I came home, the police were there. They said Mommy had a car accident. Then Aunt Vanessa came and took me away. What did your aunt say? Sophie's face crumpled. She said Mommy was careless. She said now I belong to her. She said she would teach me how to behave. Mrs. Torres crossed herself. Marcus felt that rage bloom again, hotter this time, but he kept his voice steady. You don't belong to anyone, Sophie. You're a person, and people deserve to be safe and loved. Sophie looked up at him with those two old eyes. Are you going to send me away? No, Marcus knelt beside her chair. I'm going to make sure you're safe. And that means some people need to know you're here. Good people. People who protect children. Sophie's lip trembled. Will they take me away from you? Not if I have anything to say about it. The doorbell rang. Marcus stood, smoothing his shirt. Mrs. Torres gave him a long look, then nodded. Sophie stayed at the table, fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Marcus opened the door to find Officer Hale, broad-shouldered in his NYPD jacket, and beside him, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a worn leather briefcase. Elena Cross, Child Protective Services. Mr. Thorne? Elena extended her hand. I'm Elena Cross, CPS. Officer Hale and I are here about the child you reported. Marcus shook her hand. Her name is Sophie Reed. She's 7. I found her in Central Park 2 hours ago. Hypothermic, bruised, alone. Elena's expression darkened. May we come in? Marcus led them into the living room, keeping his voice low. Sophie's in the dining room. She's terrified. Her aunt told her not to talk to police or go to hospitals. Officer Hale frowned. The aunt has custody? According to Sophie, yes. Her mother is in the hospital after a car accident 3 weeks ago. The aunt, Vanessa Reed, has been caring for her since. Caring, Elena's tone was dry. She glanced toward the dining room where Sophie sat frozen, watching them with wide eyes. Elena approached slowly, crouching down to Sophie's level. Hi, Sophie. My name is Elena. I work to make sure kids are safe. Can we talk for a few minutes? Sophie looked at Marcus. He nodded encouragingly. It's okay, sweetheart. Elena is here to help. Sophie, Elena said gently, can you tell me about the bruises on your arms? Sophie pulled her sleeves down, shaking her head. It's okay. You're not in trouble. I just want to understand what happened. Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. Aunt Vanessa gets angry when I do things wrong. She grabs me. And Uncle Derek, he pushes me. Marcus's jaw tightened. Uncle Derek? Aunt Vanessa's boyfriend. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. He yells a lot. He drinks the bad drinks that make him mean. Elena jotted notes, her expression grim. Officer Hale stepped forward. Sophie, when was the last time you saw your mom? Before the accident. Sophie's tears spilled over. I want to see her. Is she okay? She's in the hospital, honey. She's being taken care of. Elena shot Marcus a look. Mr. Thorne, can we speak privately? Marcus nodded. Miss Torres moved to sit with Sophie, wrapping an arm around the girl's small shoulders. In the hallway, Elena's professional mask slipped. This is bad. Those bruises are defensive. Someone grabbed her repeatedly. Hard. Officer Hale added, if the mother is hospitalized and the aunt is the current guardian, we need to move carefully. But CPS can place Sophie in emergency protective custody. With me? Marcus asked. Elena studied him. You understand what that means? Background checks, home visits, court hearings, I understand. And I'm ready. Why? Elena's question was not unkind but direct. You don't know this child. Why take this on? Marcus looked past them toward the dining room where Sophie sat clutching Mrs. Torres' hand. Because I lost my daughter a year ago. I wasn't there when she needed me most. I can't bring Lily back. But I can be here for Sophie. Elena held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, Mr. Thorne, we'll start the paperwork. But you should know, this won't be easy. The aunt has legal standing. This will go to court. Let it. Marcus's voice was steel. Sophie deserves better than what she's had. After Elena and Officer Hale left, Marcus returned to the dining room. Sophie had finished eating and now sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the fire. Mrs. Torres had retreated to give them space. Marcus sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. Sophie, you're going to stay here for a while. With me and Mrs. Torres. Is that okay? Sophie looked up at him. You won't let Aunt Vanessa take me? I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. Promise? Promise, Alma. Sophie's small hand reached out and found his. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Just Marcus is fine, sweetheart. They sat together in the firelight, the city glittering beyond the windows. For the first time in a year, Marcus Thorne felt something other than emptiness. It was not happiness. Not yet. But it was purpose. And for now, that was enough. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the guest room, Marcus stood at his office window, phone pressed to his ear. The man on the other end answered on the second ring. Thorne? Ray Sullivan's voice was gravel softened by whiskey. Didn't think I'd hear from you again. I need you, Ray. Must be serious. Ray had been Marcus's investigator during the corporate wars. A retired NYPD detective turned private eye. Ray was the kind of man who could make problems disappear without leaving fingerprints. A 7-year-old girl, mother's in a coma after a car accident. Aunt has custody, but the girl's covered in bruises. Marcus paused. I don't think the accident was an accident. Ray was silent for a long moment. Kids. That's heavy work, Thorne. I know, but something isn't right. The aunt warned Sophie away from police. The girl's terrified. What do you need? Everything. The accident report, the aunt's background, financials, anyone connected to the mother. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. I need to know what really happened. Ray exhaled slowly. All right, send me the details. I'll start digging tomorrow. Marcus hung up and stared out at the city. Somewhere out there, answers waited, and he would find them. For Sophie, for Lily, for the man he should have been a year ago but was only now learning to become. Behind him, the penthouse was quiet, but it was not empty. Down the hall, Sophie slept beneath clean sheets, her small chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of a child who, for the first time in weeks, felt safe. Marcus walked to Lily's room. He stood outside the locked door, his hand hovering over the handle. He had not opened it since the funeral. Inside, everything remained frozen. Lily's books, her toys, her drawings taped to the walls. But tonight, with Sophie sleeping down the hall, Marcus turned the key. The door swung open. Moonlight spilled across the lavender walls, the shelf lined with stuffed animals, the bed still made with Lily's favorite quilt. Marcus stepped inside. He sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the snow globe from the nightstand. He shook it gently. White glitter swirled around the porcelain girl in the red scarf. I'm sorry I wasn't there, Lily. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. The snow globe caught the moonlight, casting fractured rainbows across the ceiling. But I'm here now, and I'm going to do better. I'm going to save her. Marcus set the snow globe down carefully. I'm going to save both of us. He sat in Lily's room for a long time, letting the memories wash over him without running. The pain was still there, sharp and terrible. But now, for the first time, there was something else alongside it. Hope. Small and fragile, but real. When Marcus finally left the room, he did not lock the door behind him. The next morning, Marcus's phone rang before dawn. Ray's number flashed on the screen. You were right, Ray's voice was tight. The accident wasn't an accident. Marcus sat up, suddenly awake. What did you find? I pulled the police report. Single car collision, Lincoln Tunnel, 3 weeks ago. They ruled it driver error, loss of control, but I checked the traffic cam footage. And there was another car, dark sedan. It clipped Claire Reed's rear quarter panel right before she hit the wall. Then it disappeared. No report filed, no follow-up. Marcus's blood went cold. Someone ran her off the road. That's what it looks like. And here's the kicker. The tunnel cameras mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly the 2 hours surrounding the accident. Convenient, right? Too convenient, Ray paused. Thorne, if someone wanted Claire Reed dead, Sophie's in danger too. Marcus looked down the hall toward the guest room where Sophie still slept. Then we find out who, and we stop them. I'm on it, Ray's voice carried the weight of old battles. But watch your back. People who hurt kids don't stop unless you make them. The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone and walked to the window. The city was waking, oblivious. Out there somewhere a threat lurked. Someone who had tried to kill Claire. Someone who had left Sophie alone in the cold to die. Marcus's reflection stared back at him from the glass. A year ago, he had been a coward. He had run from pain, hidden behind work, let the people he loved slip away. Not anymore. Sophie needed him. And this time, Marcus Thorne would not run. This time, he would fight. Not with money, not with power, but with something he had forgotten he possessed. Love. Fierce and unrelenting and willing to break the world to keep one small girl safe. Behind him, the penthouse stirred to life. Mrs. Torres moved through the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Down the hall, Sophie's door creaked open. Small footsteps padded across the marble. "Mr. Marcus?" Sophie's voice was tentative. Marcus turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, still drowning in the oversized pajamas, her hair a tangle of gold. She looked impossibly small, impossibly fragile. But when she looked at him, her eyes held something new. Not fear, not anymore. Trust. "Good morning, sweetheart." Marcus smiled, and it felt like the first real smile in a year. "Are you hungry?" Sophie nodded, and then, without hesitation, she crossed the room and slipped her small hand into his. Together they walked toward the light of the kitchen, toward the smell of fresh pancakes and Mrs. Torres humming, toward a future neither of them could yet imagine. But for the first time since Lily died, Marcus believed in tomorrow. And that belief, small and fierce, was enough to change everything. The morning sun cut through the penthouse windows like a blade, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden shafts. Sophie sat at the kitchen island, legs swinging beneath the marble counter, watching Mrs. Torres roll dough with practiced hands. The warmth of the oven wrapped around them like a promise that winter could not break. "Today we make gingerbread cookies." Mrs. Torres dusted flour across the counter with a flourish. "You ever make cookies before, Nina?" Sophie shook her head, eyes wide. "Never." "Then it is time you learn." Mrs. Torres pushed the dough toward her. "Press your hands here. Like this. Make it flat." Sophie pressed her small palms into the dough, giggling as it squished between her fingers. The sound was pure and light, and it filled the kitchen with something Marcus had not heard in this apartment for too long. Joy. He stood in the doorway, coffee mug forgotten in his hand, watching. 3 days had passed since he found Sophie on that frozen bench. 3 days, and already the apartment felt different. Alive. The ghost of Lily no longer haunted every corner. Instead, there was Sophie's laughter, her quiet questions, her small presence reshaping the space into something new. "Mrs. Torres," Sophie said suddenly, still focused on the dough, "why is Mr. Marcus sad?" Mrs. Torres paused, her weathered hands stilling. She glanced at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded permission. He lost someone very special. A little girl, his daughter. Sophie looked up, understanding blooming across her face. "She went to heaven?" "Yes, Nina. She is with the angels now." Sophie was quiet for a moment, pressing her thumbs into the dough to make patterns. Then she said, "My grandma went to heaven too. Mommy said she's watching over me." "Is Mr. Marcus's daughter watching over him?" "I think so." Mrs. Torres' voice was thick. "I think she sent you to him." Sophie considered this seriously. "Then I'll make cookies for both of them, for the girl in heaven and for Mr. Marcus, so he won't be sad anymore." Marcus had to turn away, blinking hard against the sudden sting in his eyes. This child, this beautiful, broken, impossibly kind child. She had been thrown away like garbage, beaten and abandoned, and still she thought of others first. By the time the cookies were cooling on wire racks, Sophie had shaped 3 gingerbread figures. She decorated them with intense concentration, tongue poking out between her teeth as she piped white icing. "This one is Mommy." Sophie added a tiny apron made of frosting. "This one is me, the smallest figure, with one arm slightly crooked where the dough had torn. And this one is you, Mr. Marcus, the tallest figure with a careful tie drawn down its chest." She arranged them on the counter, hands touching. "This is my family." Marcus crouched beside her, throat tight. "That's beautiful, Sophie. Can we save them? Not eat them? I want to keep them." "Of course we can." Sophie beamed. "When Mommy wakes up, I'll show her. She'll be so happy I have a family again." The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Marcus straightened, his body tensing. He checked his watch. 10 o'clock. Right on time. Elena Cross stood in the hallway, briefcase in hand, her expression professionally neutral. Behind her was a man in his 50s, balding, with sharp eyes that cataloged everything. Dr. Martinez, Marcus's personal physician, whom he had called at Marcus's request. "Mr. Thorne." Elena stepped inside. "This is the home visit we discussed. Dr. Martinez will examine Sophie, and I'll be evaluating the living environment." "Of course." Marcus gestured them in. "Sophie's in the kitchen." But as they rounded the corner, Sophie took one look at the strangers and bolted. She ran down the hallway and disappeared into the guest room, the door slamming behind her. Mrs. Torres sighed. She is afraid of officials. The aunt, she told the Nina that people like this would take her away forever. Elena nodded grimly. Unfortunately common in abuse cases, may I? She walked slowly down the hall and knocked softly on the door. Sophie? My name is Elena. We met the other night, remember? I'm not here to take you anywhere. I just want to make sure you're healthy and safe. Silence. I brought someone with me, a doctor. His name is Dr. Martinez. He's very kind. He just wants to check that you're feeling okay. Then we'll leave you alone, I promise. The door cracked open. Sophie peered through the gap, eyes red. Mr. Marcus will stay with me. Every second, Marcus appeared beside Elena. I promised you, remember? The door opened wider. Sophie stepped out, still wearing the oversized pajamas, clutching the sleeve of Marcus's coat like a talisman. Okay, but don't take me away. We won't, honey. Elena's voice was gentle. You're safe here. In the living room, Dr. Martinez set up his medical bag with efficient movements. Sophie climbed onto the couch, Marcus sitting beside her, his presence a wall between her and the rest of the world. The examination was thorough. Dr. Martinez checked her vitals, listened to her heart, examined her ears and throat. Then he gently rolled up her sleeves. The bruises were fading but still visible, green and yellow shadows where purple had been. Dr. Martinez photographed each one with clinical precision. Then he made notes in his tablet, his jaw tight. When he was done, he pulled Elena aside. Marcus stayed with Sophie, but he could hear their low voices, patterned bruising consistent with repeated gripping. Defensive posture when I approached her left side, suggesting previous trauma there. Mild malnutrition, untreated ear infection, at least 2 weeks old. His voice dropped lower. This child has been systematically neglected and abused. Lena's response was sharp. Will you testify to that in court? Without hesitation. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Evidence. Official, documented evidence. Vanessa Reed would not walk away from this. But then Elena approached him, her expression troubled. Mr. Thorne, we need to discuss Sophie's mother. Claire Reed, what about her? She's at Presbyterian Hospital. ICU, coma, caused by severe head trauma from the car accident 3 weeks ago. What's her prognosis? Elena hesitated. Not good. The doctors say she could wake up tomorrow or never. There's just no way to know. Marcus glanced at Sophie, who was showing Dr. Martinez her gingerbread family. And Vanessa Reed is her legal guardian? Yes. Claire signed temporary guardianship papers the day before the accident, naming Vanessa as Sophie's caretaker in case of emergency. That's convenient timing. Elena raised an eyebrow. You think the papers are suspicious? I think everything about this is suspicious. Marcus kept his voice low. A woman signs over guardianship of her daughter, then gets run off the road the next day? The aunt immediately starts abusing the child? This wasn't random. Elena studied him. What are you suggesting? That someone wanted Claire out of the way, and that someone has access to Sophie. If you're right, Elena said slowly, then Sophie is in immediate danger. Vanessa could come for her at any time. Let her try. Marcus's voice was cold. I'll be ready. After Elena and Dr. Martinez left, the apartment fell into a strange quiet. Sophie returned to the kitchen to admire her cookies. Mrs. Torres began preparing lunch, and Marcus retreated to his office to make a call. Ray answered on the first ring. Tell me you have something, more than something. I have a name. Ray's voice crackled with satisfaction. Derek Morgan, 28 years old, Vanessa Reed's boyfriend. He's got a record. Bar fights, illegal street racing, assault on a former girlfriend, though she dropped the charges. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What's his connection to the accident? He works at an unlicensed garage in the Bronx, specializes in quick paint jobs, no questions asked. Ray paused. And get this, 2 days after Claire Reed's accident, Derek brought in a dark sedan, repainted the whole rear quarter panel. Son of a bitch. I've got a source who saw the car before the paint job. It had fresh damage, consistent with a collision. Ray's voice turned grim. I'm 90% sure Derek Morgan is the one who ran Claire off the road. Can you prove it? Working on it. I need a sample of the old paint, maybe tire marks, security footage from the garage. But Thorne, if I'm right, this is attempted murder. And Vanessa Reed is the one who ordered it. Marcus closed his eyes, rage and relief warring in his chest. Why? Why would she kill her own sister? Money, Ray said flatly. I pulled Claire's financials. She has a life insurance policy. $1 million. Beneficiary is Sophie. And if Sophie's in Vanessa's custody, then Vanessa controls that money. So Claire wasn't just in the way. She was worth more dead. Exactly. And Sophie's the golden ticket. Government assistance, survivor benefits, plus the insurance payout once Claire dies. Ray's voice hardened. Vanessa Reed isn't an ant. She's a predator. Marcus opened his eyes, staring at the city beyond his window. How long and until you have proof? A week, maybe less. I'm watching Derek's garage tonight. If I can get inside, get a paint sample, we'll have him. Be careful. Always am. Ray hung up. Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. 1 week until they could prove Vanessa's guilt. 1 week until Sophie would be safe. But a lot could happen in a week. That afternoon, Marcus took Sophie to the piano. The grand Steinway sat in the corner of the living room, untouched since Lily died. Its black surface gleamed like a dark mirror. Do you play? Sophie asked, running her small fingers along the keys without pressing them. I used to. Marcus sat on the bench, the leather creaking beneath him. My daughter loved music. I taught her to play. What was her favorite song? Marcus's throat tightened. First Noel, It's a Christmas Carol. Can you play it for me? Marcus hesitated. His fingers hovered over the keys, stiff and uncertain. He had not played since the funeral, since the day they had lowered Lily into the ground while a choir sang hymns that felt like knives. But Sophie was looking at him with such hope, such trust. So Marcus pressed down. The first notes came out halting, uneven. His fingers stumbled over the melody, missing keys, hitting wrong notes. Sophie wrinkled her nose. You're playing it wrong. Marcus stopped, surprised. Then he laughed. It was a rusty sound startled out of him. You're right, I am. Here, let me help. Sophie climbed onto the bench beside him. She hummed the melody, clear and true. Like this. Marcus tried again, slower this time, guided by her small voice. The notes came closer to right. Not perfect, but closer. Sophie clapped her hands, delighted. See, you just needed help. I guess I did. Marcus smiled down at her. Thank you, Sophie. Can we play it again? Together? They played, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. Marcus's fingers remembered the patterns, the muscle memory returning like an old language. And Sophie hummed beside him, her voice filling the spaces where his playing faltered. Mrs. Torres stood in the doorway, arms folded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She did not interrupt. She simply let the moment breathe, let the music fill the apartment for the first time in a year. When they finished, Sophie leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder. Your daughter would be proud of you. Marcus had to close his eyes against the wave of emotion. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Marcus stood outside Lily's room again. The door was unlocked now, slightly ajar. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Everything was exactly as Lily had left it. Her books lined up on the shelf, her drawings taped to the walls, her stuffed animals arranged on the bed. Marcus sat on the floor, his back against the wall, and let himself remember. Not the ending, not the hospital room or the funeral, but the good parts. Lily's laugh, her questions that never stopped, the way she would climb into his lap during thunderstorms, small and trusting. A soft sound made him look up. Sophie stood in the doorway, drowning in one of his old shirts that she had claimed as a nightgown. I couldn't sleep. The wind is loud. Come here. Marcus patted the floor beside him. Sophie patted across the carpet and settled next to him, tucking herself against his side. She looked around the room with quiet curiosity. This was your daughter's room? Yes, her name was Lily. Sophie picked up the snow globe from the nightstand and shook it gently. Glitter swirled around the porcelain girl in the red scarf. She looks happy. She was. If she's in heaven, can she see us? The question was so earnest, so full of childish hope, that Marcus had to swallow hard before answering. Yes, I believe she can. Then she can see you helping me. Sophie smiled, her eyes drifting closed. That's good. She'll be happy you're not sad anymore. Marcus looked down at this small girl who had stumbled into his life like a miracle wrapped in tragedy. Sophie had curled against him, already half asleep, trusting him completely. And in that moment, sitting in his dead daughter's room with a living child in his arms, Marcus understood something profound. Healing did not mean forgetting. It meant carrying the love forward. It meant letting Lily's memory be a bridge to Sophie's future instead of a wall around his past. He stayed there until Sophie's breathing deepened into sleep. Then he carefully lifted her, carried her back to the guest room, and tucked her into bed. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. Down the hall, Lily's door remained open. The ghosts were still there. They always would be, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like wings. The attack came 3 days later, swift and vicious and entirely predictable. Marcus was in his office reviewing contracts when his phone exploded with notifications, text messages, emails, calls from numbers he did not recognize. He opened the first message and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a video. Vanessa Reed stood in front of his building, phone held high, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Behind her, a small crowd had gathered, and the video was live. "My name is Vanessa Reed, and I am begging for help." Vanessa's voice shook with theatrical emotion. "My niece Sophie is 7 years old. She was stolen from me by a man with money and power, a man who thinks he can buy anything, even children." The camera panned to show Marcus's building, its sleek glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun. "Sophie's mother, my sister Claire, is in a coma. She trusted me to care for Sophie, but this man, Marcus Thorne, has taken her. He's keeping her prisoner in his penthouse, using his wealth to manipulate the system." Vanessa sobbed into the camera. "I'm just a working woman. I don't have fancy lawyers or millions of dollars. All I have is love for my niece, and I'm begging anyone who sees this, please help me bring Sophie home." The video ended, but Marcus could see the damage already spreading. Shares, comments. The hashtag Save Sophie was already trending. His phone rang. "Elena Cross, have you seen it?" Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "Just now, it's bad, Mr. Thorne. My office is getting calls. The press is outside your building." Vanessa Reed is playing this perfectly. Rich man versus poor aunt. The optics are terrible. The optics don't matter. The truth matters. In court, yes, but public opinion can pressure judges. Elena sighed. "We need to be prepared." Vanessa filed an emergency petition this morning. Hearing is in 2 days. She's demanding immediate return of custody. 2 days. Marcus looked toward the living room where Sophie was playing with building blocks, unaware of the storm gathering. "Then we'll be ready." After he hung up, Marcus called his lawyer. Robert Chen arrived within the hour, his expression grim as he reviewed the video on his tablet. "This is going to be difficult." Robert set down the tablet and fixed Marcus with a hard stare. "Vanessa has public sympathy. She has blood relation. And she has legal guardianship papers signed by the mother. And we have evidence of abuse, which we'll present. But you need to understand, Mr. Thorne, family court prioritizes keeping children with blood relatives whenever possible. The burden of proof is on us to show that Vanessa is unfit, not just neglectful, unfit. Then that's what we'll prove." Robert nodded slowly. "All right, but I need you to be prepared for the possibility that we lose the temporary custody hearing, that Sophie could be ordered back to Vanessa while the investigation continues." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "That won't happen. It might. And if it does," Robert continued carefully, "you cannot interfere. If you try to keep Sophie against a court order, you'll lose all credibility, possibly face criminal charges. Do you understand?" Marcus understood. He understood that the system was slow and bureaucratic and sometimes failed the people it was meant to protect. He understood that Sophie could be torn from his arms and handed back to the woman who had beaten her. But he also understood that he had resources, money, connections, a private investigator who was, at this very moment, gathering evidence that would destroy Vanessa Reed. He just needed to buy enough time. "I understand." Marcus met Robert's eyes. "Do whatever it takes. File every motion. Call every witness. I want that courtroom so full of evidence that the judge has no choice but to see the truth." Robert gathered his papers. "I'll do my best." But Marcus? He paused at the door. Prepare yourself, and prepare Sophie. This is going to get worse before it gets better. That night, Marcus sat Sophie down on the couch. Mrs. Torres hovered nearby, hands twisted in her apron. Sophie, I need to talk to you about something important. Sophie looked up from her coloring book. Crayon paused mid-stroke. Okay, your Aunt Vanessa is trying to take you back. Sophie's face went pale. No, she shook her head violently. No, I don't want to go back. Please don't make me go back. I'm not going to. Marcus took her small hands in his. Listen to me. In 2 days, we're going to court. A judge is going to decide where you should live. And I'm going to fight as hard as I can to keep you here. But I need you to be brave. Will I have to see Aunt Vanessa? Yes, and you might have to tell the judge what she did to you. Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks. I'm scared, I know. Marcus pulled her into his arms. But you're the bravest person I know. You survived in that park. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You're stronger than you think. What if the judge makes me go back? Then I'll keep fighting. I'll fight every single day until you're safe. Marcus pulled back to look her in the eyes. But Sophie, I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens in that courtroom, you tell the truth, even if it's scary. Can you do that? Sophie nodded, small and uncertain. I'll try. That's all I ask. That night, Marcus could not sleep. He stood at his office window, watching the city lights blur through the glass. Somewhere out there, Ray was breaking into Derek Morgan's garage. Somewhere out there, Vanessa Reed was preparing her lies. And somewhere out there, Claire Reed lay unconscious, unaware that her daughter's fate hung in the balance. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He had spent 20 years building an empire. He had crushed competitors, won impossible deals, made himself untouchable in the world of business. But none of that mattered now, because he could not buy his way out of this. He could not negotiate with the judge or threaten his way to victory. All he could do was stand in that courtroom and tell the truth, and pray that truth was enough. His phone buzzed. A text from Ray. 3 words. I got it. Marcus closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. The paint sample. Evidence linking Derek Morgan to the accident. Proof of the conspiracy. Ray's next text came through. Sending to forensics now. Should have results before the hearing. Marcus typed back, thank you. The response was immediate. Don't thank me yet. We still have to win. Marcus pocketed his phone and walked down the hall. Sophie's door was ajar. He pushed it open quietly. She was asleep, curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face. She looked peaceful, safe, as if the world outside could not touch her here. Marcus made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever he had to sacrifice. Sophie would not go back to Vanessa Reed. She would not be hurt again. She would not be abandoned. This time, Marcus would not fail. He pulled the door closed and returned to his office. There were calls to make, lawyers to brief, strategies to plan. The battle for Sophie had begun, and Marcus Thorne would not surrender until he won. The courtroom smelled of old wood and disinfectant, a peculiar sterility that seemed designed to strip away emotion and leave only facts. Family Court, 3rd floor, Judge Patricia Hammond presiding. The words were carved into brass above the door, as if permanence could lend them authority. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, Robert Chen beside him, a mountain of folders stacked between them like a fortress of paper. Across the aisle, Vanessa Reed perched on the edge of her chair, dressed in mourning black, her lawyer Richard Hayes whispering instructions into her ear. Behind Vanessa, slouched in the back row with the arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable, sat Derek Morgan. The gallery was nearly empty. Family court proceedings were closed to the public, but Elena Cross sat in the second row, her face professionally neutral. Ray Sullivan occupied the far corner, a shadow in a leather jacket, his eyes never leaving Derek. Sophie sat beside Marcus, small and terrified in a navy dress Mrs. Torres had bought for the occasion. Her hands twisted in her lap, fingers nodding and unknodding in a rhythm that spoke of barely contained panic. Marcus reached over and placed his hand over hers, stilling them. You're safe, I'm right here. Sophie looked up at him with those enormous eyes and nodded. But Marcus could feel her trembling. The bailiff stood. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hammond. They rose. The judge entered through a side door, her black robe sweeping behind her like wings. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that had seen too many broken families to hold any illusions about human nature. She took her seat, arranging papers with precise movements. "Be seated." Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "We're here for an emergency custody hearing regarding Sophie Marie Reed, age 7. Ms. Reed, you filed the petition?" "Yes, Your Honor." Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I'm Sophie's aunt, her only living relative besides her mother, who is currently hospitalized." Judge Hammond glanced at her notes. "And Mr. Thorne, you currently have temporary placement through Child Protective Services?" Robert stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client found Sophie abandoned in Central Park on the night of December 24th. She was suffering from hypothermia and showed clear signs of abuse. CPS placed her in his care pending this hearing." The judge's gaze moved to Sophie. "Hello, Sophie." Sophie shrank against Marcus. "Hello, you don't need to be afraid. I'm here to make sure you're safe and well cared for." "Do you understand?" Sophie nodded, mute. "Good." Judge Hammond turned back to the lawyers. "Mr. Hayes, your client wishes to regain custody. Make your case." Richard Hayes stood, smoothing his tie. A performance was about to begin, and he was ready for his spotlight. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Vanessa Reed is Sophie's biological aunt and legal guardian. Her sister, Claire Reed, signed guardianship papers specifically naming Vanessa as Sophie's caretaker in the event of emergency. That emergency occurred when Claire was hospitalized after a car accident. Vanessa stepped in to fulfill her legal duty. He gestured toward Marcus with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Thorne, however well-intentioned, is a stranger. He has no legal relationship to Sophie, no biological connection, no prior knowledge of her existence. He simply saw an opportunity, perhaps for publicity, perhaps for tax benefits, perhaps out of some misguided savior complex, and inserted himself into a family matter." Hayes pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen. "Furthermore, my client has been subjected to a vicious smear campaign. Mr. Thorne has used his wealth and influence to paint Vanessa as an abuser without a shred of credible evidence. He has essentially kidnapped my client's niece and is now using the courts to legitimize that kidnapping. Your Honor, Vanessa Reed may not be wealthy, she may not live in a penthouse, but she loves Sophie. She is family. And the law recognizes that children belong with their families whenever possible." Hayes sat down, satisfaction radiating from him. Judge Hammond's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Chen, your response." Robert stood, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes is correct that Vanessa Reed is Sophie's biological aunt. What he neglects to mention is that Sophie has been systematically abused while in Vanessa Reed's care." Robert opened the first folder. "We have medical documentation from Dr. Raymond Martinez, a licensed physician with 30 years of experience. He examined Sophie 2 days after Mr. Thorne found her. His findings are unequivocal. Multiple contusions in various stages of healing. Defensive bruising patterns consistent with being grabbed forcefully and repeatedly. Malnutrition, an untreated ear infection, and moderate hypothermia from being left outside in 8-degree weather." He pulled out photographs, handing copies to the judge. "These are the bruises. These are not from playing too hard or falling down. These are from being hurt by an adult." Vanessa made a choking sound. "That's not fair." Sophie was clumsy. "I did my best. Ms. Reed, you'll have your chance to speak." Judge Hammond's voice was sharp. "Continue, Mr. Chen." Robert nodded. "We also have testimony from Officer Michael Hale of the NYPD, who responded to Mr. Thorne's call. He will testify that Sophie was found alone at night in below freezing temperatures, and that when questioned, she stated her aunt had told her to wait there and not to seek help from police or hospitals. But perhaps most damning, Your Honor, is what we discovered about the circumstances of Claire Reed's accident." Robert's voice dropped, became harder. 3 weeks ago, Claire Reed was involved in a single car collision in the Lincoln Tunnel. Police ruled it driver error. But our investigator discovered evidence suggesting it was not an accident at all. Hayes shot to his feet. "Objection. This hearing is about custody, not wild conspiracy theories." "It goes to motive, Your Honor." Robert turned back to the judge. "Vanessa Reed stands to gain significant financial benefit from her sister's incapacitation. Claire Reed has a $1 million life insurance policy with Sophie as the beneficiary. If Claire dies and Vanessa has custody of Sophie, she controls that money. Additionally, as Sophie's guardian, Vanessa would receive substantial government assistance. Your Honor, this woman did not take in her niece out of love. She took her in for profit. And when Sophie became inconvenient, she left her to die in the cold. The courtroom erupted. Vanessa was on her feet, screaming, "That's a lie! I would never hurt my sister. I loved her." Hayes was shouting objections. Judge Hammond's gavel came down like thunder. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." Slowly, the chaos subsided. Vanessa sank back into her chair, her performance cracking at the edges. Derek had gone very still, his eyes locked on Ray in the back corner. Judge Hammond fixed Robert with a hard stare. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Chen. I assume you have evidence to support them?" "We do, Your Honor." Robert gestured and Ray stood, moving forward with a manila envelope. "Ray Sullivan, private investigator. He has obtained forensic evidence linking Derek Morgan, Mrs. Reed's boyfriend, to the vehicle that struck Claire Reed's car in the tunnel." Judge Hammond took the envelope, scanning the contents. Her expression remained neutral, but something tightened around her eyes. "This is a police matter. We've already forwarded copies to the NYPD. But, Your Honor, the point is this. Sophie is not safe with Vanessa Reed. She never was. Mr. Thorne didn't kidnap her. He saved her life." The judge set down the papers. "I'm going to hear testimony. Ms. Reed, you're first." Vanessa approached the witness stand with calculated humility, her shoulders hunched, her steps small. She swore on the Bible, her hand shaking just enough to be noticeable, but not so much as to seem fake. Hayes began gently. "Ms. Reed, how long have you known Sophie?" "Since she was born." Vanessa's voice was soft, wounded. "I'm her aunt. I was there when Claire brought her home from the hospital. I've been part of her life always. And when your sister was hospitalized, what did you do?" "I took Sophie in immediately." Vanessa looked at the judge, tears welling. "Claire and we didn't have much growing up. Our mother died when we were young. Our father was, well, he wasn't around much. Claire was always the strong one. She made something of herself. Became a nurse, but I struggled. I never had her opportunities." Her voice broke beautifully. "When Claire had Sophie, I was so happy for her. Finally, our family was growing. And when the accident happened, when they told me Claire might not wake up, I knew I had to step in. Sophie needed family. She needed me. But Mr. Thorne has accused you of abuse. How do you respond?" Vanessa's face crumpled. Sophie was hurting, missing her mother. She acted out sometimes, threw tantrums. I'll admit, I wasn't perfect. I had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. I couldn't always be there. But I never hurt her on purpose. If she has bruises, it's because she fell. She was clumsy. I tried to watch her, but I can't be everywhere at once." She turned toward Marcus, her eyes hardening for just a fraction of a second before softening again. "This man has so much. Money, resources, a beautiful home. Of course Sophie wants to stay there. What child wouldn't? But that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means I'm poor." Hayes nodded sympathetically. "And the night Mr. Thorne found Sophie in the park?" Vanessa hesitated. "I told her to wait outside our building, just for a few minutes while I ran upstairs to get something. But when I came back down, she was gone. I searched everywhere. I was terrified. And then I found out this stranger had taken her." "You didn't tell her to stay in the park?" "No, never. She must have wandered off." Robert stood for cross-examination, and his first question cut through Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative like a scalpel. "Ms. Reed, if Sophie wandered off from your building, why didn't you call the police?" Vanessa blinked. I was going to, but then I heard she was safe." "You heard from whom?" From someone. I don't remember." Robert pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. "According to NYPD records, you did not report Sophie missing at any time. In fact, the first contact you had with authorities was 3 days later, when CPS informed you they had placed Sophie in protective custody." Vanessa's composure slipped. "I was in shock. I wasn't thinking clearly." "Were you in shock when you went to the pawn shop on 113th Street 2 days after Sophie disappeared?" Vanessa paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Robert placed a photograph on the evidence table. "This is you, Ms. Reed, selling a silver bracelet, a bracelet that belonged to your sister Claire. You sold it for $250 while Claire lay in a coma and Sophie was missing." I needed money. For what? Robert's voice was relentless. You claim you were searching for Sophie, but instead of calling police, instead of organizing a search, you sold your comatose sister's jewelry. Why? Vanessa's mask was cracking, rage bleeding through the cracks. You don't understand. You've never been poor. You don't know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to care for a child, and selling their mother's belongings while they're missing doesn't fit that description. Hayes objected, but the damage was done. Vanessa stepped down from the witness stand, her performance shattered, her true nature showing through. Judge Hammond made notes, her pen scratching across paper. Mr. Thorne, you're next. Marcus approached the stand, very aware of Sophie's eyes tracking him across the room. He swore on the Bible, his hand steady, and sat. Robert began. Mr. Thorne, why did you take Sophie in? Marcus looked at the judge, choosing his words carefully. Because I lost my daughter a year ago, Lily. She was 6. She died while I was at a business meeting because I thought a contract was more important than being at her bedside. He paused, throat tight. When I saw Sophie on that bench, freezing and alone, I saw a second chance. Not to replace Lily, but to be the man Lily would have wanted me to be. The man I should have been for her. You had no obligation to help Sophie. You didn't know her, no. But she was a child in danger. That's all the obligation I needed. Mr. Thorne, you're a wealthy man. Some might say you're using Sophie for publicity or tax benefits. How do you respond? Marcus met Hayes' eyes across the room. I've made my fortune. I don't need publicity. I don't need tax breaks. What I need is to keep a little girl safe. That's all I've ever wanted since the night I found her. Robert nodded. No further questions. Hayes stood, circling like a shark. Mr. Thorne, you claim to care about Sophie, but you've known her for, what, 5 days? 6? 6 days. Hayes' tone was mocking. And in that time, you've convinced yourself you're better suited to raise her than her own flesh and blood? I've convinced myself she's safer with me than with a woman who left her to freeze to death. Hayes' expression hardened. You've also hired a private investigator to dig into my client's life, to manufacture evidence against her. I hired an investigator to find the truth. The truth. Hayes laughed bitterly. Or a convenient narrative that serves your purposes? Marcus leaned forward. My purpose is keeping Sophie alive. If that's inconvenient for your client, then I suggest your client shouldn't have beaten a child. The judge's gavel came down. Mr. Thorne, restrain yourself. Marcus sat back, jaw tight, but his point had been made. When Hayes finished, clearly frustrated, the judge turned to Sophie. Sophie, I'd like to talk to you now. Is that all right? Sophie looked at Marcus. He nodded encouragement. She stood on shaking legs and approached the witness stand. The bailiff brought a step stool so she could reach the microphone. Judge Hammond's voice softened. Sophie, you're not in trouble. I just want to understand how you're feeling. Can you tell me where you'd like to live? Sophie's voice was barely audible. With Mr. Marcus. Why? Because. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Aunt Vanessa hurts me. She says I'm bad. She says I'm the reason Mommy got hurt. Marcus, he says I'm important. He says I'm not bad. Has Mr. Marcus ever hurt you? No. Sophie shook her head fiercely. Never. He teaches me piano. He makes me breakfast. He lets me sleep in Lily's room. He's nice to me. Judge Hammond leaned forward. Sophie, this is very important. Did your Aunt Vanessa ever tell you not to tell anyone she hurt you? Sophie nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She said if I told, she'd send me away where Mommy couldn't find me. She said nobody would believe me because I'm just a kid. And the night Mr. Marcus found you in the park. How did you get there? Aunt Vanessa and Uncle Derek were fighting. They were yelling about Mommy, about money. Uncle Derek said Mommy needed to die faster. Sophie's voice broke. I got scared. I ran. I didn't know where to go. So I went to the park. The courtroom was silent. Even Hayes had gone pale. Judge Hammond's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. Thank you, Sophie. You've been very brave. You can sit down now. Sophie climbed down from the stand and ran to Marcus. He caught her, holding her as she sobbed into his shoulder. Around them, the courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Hammond reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Then she looked up, her gaze sweeping across both tables. I've heard enough. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of abuse, neglect, and child endangerment by Vanessa Reed. Emergency protective custody is extended. Sophie will remain in the care of Mr. Marcus Thorne under CPS supervision. Vanessa shot to her feet. No, you can't. She's mine. Claire gave her to me. Ms. Reed, Judge Hammond's voice was ice. You are hereby barred from any contact with Sophie Reed pending criminal investigation. And Mr. Hayes, I suggest your client retain a criminal defense attorney because I am forwarding this evidence to the district attorney's office. The gavel came down with finality. Court adjourned. Vanessa screamed, lunging toward Marcus and Sophie. Bailiffs intercepted her, pulling her back. Derek was already moving toward the exit, but Ray stepped into his path, blocking his escape. Going somewhere? Derek's face went hard. Get out of my way, old man. Ray smiled, cold and dangerous. Can't do that. See, the cops are waiting outside. Got some questions about a car accident in the Lincoln Tunnel. Derek shoved Ray hard. Ray stumbled back, but his hand shot out, grabbing Derek's wrist. In one smooth motion, Ray twisted, and Derek went down to his knees with a yelp of pain. Two officers burst through the courtroom doors. Derek Morgan, you're under arrest for vehicular assault and leaving the scene of an accident. They pulled Derek to his feet, snapping cuffs onto his wrists. Vanessa was still screaming, still fighting the bailiffs, her composure completely shattered. You ruined everything, she spat the words at Marcus. Everything. Marcus turned his back on her, shielding Sophie from the sight. He carried her out of the courtroom, through the hallways, into the elevator. Only when the doors closed and they were alone did he let himself breathe. Is it over? Sophie whispered against his neck. For now. Marcus held her tighter. For now, you're safe. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The custody battle was won, but the war was far from over. 3 days later, Marcus stood in the observation room of the NYPD 7th Precinct, watching through one-way glass as Detective Sarah Chen questioned Derek Morgan. Ray stood beside him, arms folded, satisfaction etched into every line of his weathered face. Derek sat handcuffed to the table, his earlier arrogance replaced by the hunted look of a man who knew the walls were closing in. His lawyer, a tired public defender named Mills, sat beside him with the air of someone already planning his next case. Mr. Morgan. Detective Chen laid out a series of photographs. This is your vehicle, a 2018 Honda Accord, black, correct? Derek said nothing. We obtained a warrant to search your garage in the Bronx. Chen pulled out another photo. This is paint residue we found on your workbench. Forensic analysis matched it to paint transferred from Claire Reed's vehicle during the collision in the Lincoln Tunnel. That doesn't prove anything. Actually, it does. Chen leaned back. We also pulled your phone records. On the night of November 24th, you received 3 calls from Vanessa Reed in the hour before the accident. After the accident, you called her twice. And then you drove straight to your garage and began repainting your car. She spread her hands. Derek, we have you. Paint evidence. Phone records. Witness testimony that you were arguing about Claire Reed needing to die faster. The DA is offering a deal. Attempted murder carries 25 to life. But if you cooperate, if you testify against Vanessa, we can get that down to 15 with possibility of parole. Derek looked at his lawyer. Mills shrugged. It's your call, but she's right. The evidence is overwhelming. For a long moment, Derek said nothing. Then slowly he nodded. What do you want to know? Everything. Derek's confession spilled out in a monotone as if he were reciting something shameful but inevitable. Vanessa planned it. She knew about the life insurance. She knew if Claire died, she'd get custody of the kid and control the money. But Claire was talking about moving away, taking Sophie somewhere Vanessa couldn't reach her. So Vanessa told you to kill her, not kill. Derek's voice took on a defensive edge. Just scare her. Run her off the road. Put her in the hospital for a while so Vanessa could get the guardianship papers signed. But it went wrong. Yeah. Derek's jaw tightened. I hit her harder than I meant to. She spun out, hit the wall. I thought I'd killed her right there. But Vanessa said it was fine. Said if Claire died, even better. And Sophie? Derek's expression twisted with something that might have been shame. The kids saw too much, heard too much. Vanessa said we needed to keep her quiet. So she started, disciplining her. making sure she was too scared to talk. Disciplining. Chen's voice was flat. You mean beating a 7-year-old child? Derek looked away. I didn't touch her. That was all Vanessa. But you watched. Derek said nothing. And the night Sophie ran away? We were fighting about money. The insurance wasn't paying out fast enough. Vanessa was getting desperate. The kid heard us talking about Claire, about waiting for her to die. She freaked out, ran. Vanessa said to let her go, said if she froze to death, it'd be one less problem. Marcus felt Ray's hand on his shoulder, steadying. Through the glass, he watched Derek sign his confession, sealing Vanessa's fate along with his own. They got him. Ray's voice was quiet. They got both of them. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Justice. It felt hollow and necessary all at once. That evening, Marcus took Sophie to the hospital. She had been asking about her mother every day, and he could no longer put off the visit. They rode the elevator to the ICU in silence. Sophie's hands small and sweaty in his. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and beeping machines. Soft light filtered through blinds, casting everything in muted tones. Marcus led Sophie to Claire's room, hesitating at the door. She's going to look different than you remember. Lots of tubes and wires. But she's in there, and the doctors say she's stable. Sophie nodded, steeling herself. Then she pushed open the door. Claire Reed lay in the hospital bed, pale and still. Tubes snaked from her arms. A ventilator breathed for her, the machine's rhythm steady and mechanical. Monitors beeped softly, tracking vitals that fluctuated in gentle waves. Sophie approached slowly, her small footsteps barely audible on the linoleum. She climbed onto the chair beside the bed and took her mother's hand. Mommy? It's me. Sophie. Claire did not respond. The ventilator continued its mechanical breathing. I'm okay, Mommy. Mr. Marcus is taking care of me. He's really nice. You'd like him. Sophie's voice wavered. Aunt Vanessa can't hurt me anymore. The judge said so. Marcus stood in the doorway, giving them space. He watched Sophie lean forward, resting her head on the edge of the bed. I miss you, Mommy. Please wake up. I have so much to tell you. The monitors beeped. The ventilator breathed. And then, so faint Marcus almost missed it, Claire's fingers twitched. Sophie gasped. Mommy? Claire's eyelids fluttered. Once. Twice. And then with agonizing slowness, they opened. Her eyes were unfocused at first, struggling to orient. Then they found Sophie and something cleared. Recognition. Love. Desperate, overwhelming love. Sophie. Claire's voice was a rasp, barely audible around the breathing tube, but it was there. Sophie burst into tears, clutching her mother's hand. You're awake. You're awake. Marcus moved quickly, pressing the call button. Within seconds, nurses flooded the room, checking Claire's vitals, adjusting machine. A doctor arrived, shining lights in Claire's eyes, asking her to follow his finger, to squeeze his hand. Slowly, carefully, they removed the breathing tube. Claire coughed, gasping, her chest heaving with the effort of breathing on her own for the first time in weeks. When the medical team finally stepped back, satisfied, Claire turned her head towards Sophie. Baby, are you okay? I'm okay, I'm safe. Claire's gaze shifted to Marcus, standing in the corner. And who are you? Marcus stepped forward. I'm Marcus Thorne. I've been taking care of Sophie while you were unconscious. Claire studied him for a long moment, reading something in his face. Thank you. The words were simple, but carried enormous weight. Thank you for saving my daughter. She's an incredible girl. You raised her well. Claire's eyes welled with tears. Vanessa? She's been arrested, and she won't ever hurt Sophie again. Claire closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Good. That's good. Over the following weeks, the pieces fell into place. Derek Morgan pled guilty to attempted murder and received a sentence of 15 years. Vanessa Reed, facing overwhelming evidence in Derek's testimony, accepted a plea deal. 12 years for conspiracy to commit murder and child endangerment. The day the sentence was handed down, Marcus found himself standing outside the courthouse with Ray. Vanessa was led out in handcuffs, her face a mask of fury and defeat. When she saw Marcus, she stopped. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Vanessa's expression crumbled. I just wanted what Claire had. Is that so wrong? Marcus felt something twist in his chest, not pity, not forgiveness, just sadness for how broken people could become. You wanted it, but you went about getting it in the worst possible way. and a child paid the price. Vanessa was led away. Marcus never saw her again. Claire's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy 3 times a week, cognitive exercises to rebuild pathways damaged by the coma. And through it all, Sophie visited, bringing drawings and stories and laughter that filled Claire's hospital room with life. 2 months after waking, Claire was discharged. Marcus had arranged for her apartment to be cleaned and restocked, the rent paid for the next year. But when he offered to take Sophie home to her mother, both Claire and Sophie looked at him with identical expressions. "Can we talk?" Claire asked. They sat in Claire's small living room, Sophie between them on the worn couch. Claire took a deep breath. "I want to thank you, not just for saving Sophie, but for being there when I couldn't be." She reached over and took Marcus's hand. "You gave my daughter stability when her world was falling apart. You gave her safety and love, and I will never be able to repay that. You don't need to, but I want to ask you something." Claire glanced at Sophie, who nodded encouragement. "When the custody case goes back to court for final determination, I'm going to request that you be named Sophie's legal co-guardian." Marcus stared at her. "What? You're part of her life now. She loves you. You love her. And I think together we can give her something better than either of us could alone." Claire's voice was steady. "Not a replacement family, but an expanded one." Marcus looked at Sophie. "Is that what you want?" Sophie nodded, smiling through tears. "I want both of you. You and Mommy. Is that okay?" Marcus had to close his eyes against the sudden sting. When he opened them, he looked at Claire. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We're sure." 3 months later, Judge Patricia Hammond signed the final custody order. Claire Reed retained full parental rights. Marcus Thorne was named legal co-guardian with full decision-making authority regarding Sophie's education, health care, and welfare. Sophie would split her time between both homes, 4 days with Claire, 3 days with Marcus, alternating weeks. It was unconventional, but then so was everything about their story. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, Marcus's penthouse was transformed. Not the sterile perfection of before, but a lived-in warmth. Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her toys spilled across the living room. Her laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for too long. Claire arrived at 6 carrying a homemade apple pie. Mrs. Torres greeted her with a hug, ushering her into the kitchen. Ray was already there, sipping whiskey and arguing good-naturedly with Mrs. Torres about the correct way to roast a turkey. Sophie ran to her mother, throwing her arms around her waist. "Mommy, look!" She dragged Claire to the piano. "Mr. Marcus and I learned a new song." "Let's hear it." Sophie climbed onto the bench. Marcus sat beside her. Together they played First Noel. Not perfectly, but together. When they finished, Sophie beamed. "That was for Lily. So she knows we're thinking about her." "I think she knows." Marcus pulled Sophie into a hug. "I think she's very proud." Dinner was chaos in the best way. Too much food, too much laughter, too many people talking over each other. Sophie sat between Marcus and Claire, glowing with happiness, secure in the knowledge that she was loved. After dessert, as the adults lingered over coffee, Sophie retrieved something from her room. A drawing. She presented it to Marcus solemnly. It showed 5 people holding hands. Claire, Sophie, Marcus, Mrs. Torres, and Ray. Above them, sketched in glittery crayon, were 2 angels, one labeled Lily, one labeled Maria. At the bottom, in Sophie's careful printing, were 4 words. "Home is who stays." Marcus traced the letters with his finger, throat too tight for words. Then he pulled Sophie into his lap, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. Later, after Claire and Sophie had gone home, after Mrs. Torres and Ray had departed, Marcus stood on his balcony. The city sparkled below, Manhattan dressed in lights and snow. Somewhere out there, other children were cold and alone. Other families were breaking apart. Other lives were balanced on the edge between disaster and salvation. But here, in this moment, one little girl was safe. One little girl knew she was loved. And one man had learned that second chances were real if you were brave enough to take them. Marcus looked up at the stars, thinking of Lily, thinking of the journey that had brought him here, from despair to purpose, from isolation to family. "Thank you," he whispered to the night, to his daughter, to whatever force had guided Sophie to that frozen bench. "Thank you for giving me another patron, The wind carried his words away, but Marcus believed with everything in him that somewhere Lily heard and smiled. Inside, Sophie's gingerbread family sat on the mantel, carefully preserved under glass. Three figures holding hands: a mother, a daughter, and a man who had learned that family was not something you were born into. It was something you chose, something you built, something you fought for with everything you had, and in the end, that made it stronger than blood could ever be. The penthouse was quiet now, but it was not empty. It was full of memories and laughter and love that had taken root in the cracks of grief. Home is who stays. Marcus carried those words with him as he went to bed, knowing that tomorrow Sophie would be back, that the piano would ring with music, that life would continue in all its beautiful, messy, imperfect glory. He had lost Lily. That wound would never fully heal. But in saving Sophie, he had saved himself. And that, Marcus thought, as sleep claimed him, was the greatest gift of all.